Welcome to the Blanket Hill Podcast, where faith, storytelling, and the art of filmmaking come together. Join us as we explore how creativity and community shape meaningful, faith-based films. Each episode, we bring you insights from industry professionals, behind-the-scenes tips, and inspiring stories to fuel your passion for filmmaking. Whether you're a seasoned creator or just starting out, this is your space to learn, connect, and grow. Let's dive in. Today, we're kicking off our very first episode with an exciting conversation featuring Jesse and Shawn, the owner and chief audio engineers at Caiman Studios. Right here in Pittsburgh, Caiman Studios is a cornerstone of the Pittsburgh film community, known for their incredible work in post-audio production. Jesse and Shawn are joining us to share their expertise in crafting immersive soundscapes and the critical role audio plays in bringing a film to life. From the technical side of post-production to the collaborative spirit of filmmaking, they'll give us a deep dive into their world. Whether you're curious about audio engineering or want to learn how sound can elevate your storytelling, you're in for a treat. Let's get started.
So we were trying to figure out what we could talk about that would bring something to the table, and something that we've noticed a lot of times with films by the time they make it to us. So in the process, because neither of us really does any production audio anymore, Shawn's done some, I've unfortunately done some, but neither of us are production people. We are absolutely post-production people. Both of us like air conditioning and, a full kitchen.
Our equipment's already set up every day.
Right. We like that too much. We have a really interesting view on most films that we've worked on, because in our process, most of the time, we are among the last people that get our hands on the film. And because of that, we see a lot of the problems that have happened before us, because a lot of them kind of fall into our laps. So what we are going to mainly talk about today, and then hopefully answer some questions on, if you have any, is really talking about the process from production through post, specifically based on sound, because I think both of us fundamentally believe, whether we're working on a lower budget independent film all the way up to a mid-budget indie, the process is always exactly the same. If we're working on a $30,000 film or a $5 million film, the process we do is always identical. The amount of time we spend on that process will change, but the process itself does not change. But a little background on us. So again, my name is Jesse. I'm one of the chief engineers at the studio. Shawn's the other. The studio's been around for 17 years now. My background originally was all music production. Shawn has some music production, but has mainly for the last, however long,
25 years, yeah.
Been on the post side. Our old studios, before we were in our new building, were about 4 blocks from each other downtown. So we always kind of knew each other, and Shawn was the big post guy in town. I was the big music guy downtown, and we were always friends. And then I started getting more and more into the post world, and Shawn was nice enough to help me in that journey. And it got to a point downtown where if there was a bigger shoot or a bigger film or a bigger show working in town, if they were doing ADR, if they were doing dubbing, if they were doing anything in the post world, one of us was probably doing it. And half the time that an ADR session would call, I'd call Shawn and say, hey, I just got this call from this person. If I can't do it, can you do it? And he would go, yeah, they just called me to book too. So it was really the two of us were doing a lot of the same work. And then we got an opportunity to move to our new building, which is out on, like I said, it's on Babcock near McKnight. And it's a much bigger building, a much bigger space. And we both decided that it was time for us just to kind of go in together. Yeah. So it's the two of us. We have two other engineers, and then we have our studio manager, and that's kind of our team right now. And then we have some other people that we'll pull from when we need them. But
yeah, and some other people to just rent the studio.
Yeah,
as well.
We have our main studio, which is where we did the vast majority of the work for Judge Not. Then we have a Studio B next to it. That's more of like an edit suite. Then we have our Studio C, which is 2 floors down, which is a full mix room, record room, ADR room. And then our plan in the next probably few months, we have another space that we're going to build out 2 more edit mix suites. So the eventual goal will be to have 5 studios and 4 full-time staff engineers and bring in freelancers and extra help when we need it. But our background really, I mean, we've worked on a bunch of the big local productions, like most of the big features that have gone through town. One of us has worked on.
A lot of it too is while actors are here working on those films, they have other work they do. And usually a lot of that's audio work. So they'll do some commercials, they do voiceovers for commercials, they do voices for video games, or they're doing ADR for some other film or show that's in post while they're here on production. And so we'll hook up remotely with those other studios wherever they are in the world a lot of times too. So we get a lot of that type of work. So it's not necessarily with what's in town, it's just the actors are here and they have other work they need to do.
In a market like Pittsburgh, which is actually doing pretty well for the size of the city is, the film tax credits are pretty good here. So we get a lot of TV shows and films through. But it's never going to be a market where, you know, you don't hear a lot of DPs in town saying, I only work on high budget feature lengths. It's like, if you do that, good luck. You know, you're going to have a hard time. So we really believe everybody in town that's doing this full time and professionally, it's all about being diverse in what you can do and kind of fit into a bunch of different situations. So not just saying you're doing features, but we do a lot of shorts. We kind of work on whatever needs to have audio done on it.
Our goal also is to help build the community in town. Like, we do a lot of work with people with the 48-hour film festival. We may not necessarily work on their projects, but we'll help them, like, find people that can help them, or, you know, consult in any way that we can, you know, that sort of thing. And a lot of indie films, that was one of the things when Aaron came to us with his film and things like that. We worked with him on, you know, trying to make a way to make it work. You know, so yeah, the big work that comes through town is great, but, you know, we also can help the people that are here doing whatever type of work they're doing.
And I think the other thing that we all really, really believe is, no matter what the size of the film, it's a team of people. There's no film on the planet that is one person just doing the film. Right. It's always going to take a team. Films, even shorts, are just too big. And our big thing is not necessarily always saying, oh, we can do that, we can do that. It's also saying, here are the right people that you need to know to do that well. And here are maybe people that you shouldn't be talking to. Hopefully we don't say that very much, but it's all about connecting people and making sure those connections are good and making sure that the job is good, because at the end of the day, a market like this is really based on, you know, people take it seriously because of the product. And if the product looks and sounds and feels good, it makes everybody in the market look good, and it makes the whole market, like Shawn was saying, kind of come up together. So it's not just about, you know, sometimes you hear about everybody, you know, losing their minds over, oh, Batman was done in Pittsburgh. Yeah, it was. That was great. It happened once. But it's not just that that's going to make the film industry work. It's a combination of that and small independents and mid-sized independents and TV shows and docuseries and shorts. All of those things have to come together to make the market actually sustainable and something real. Because when you do that, that's when you also get rental houses and you get sound stages and you get all of that stuff.
The infrastructure.
So the film office in Pittsburgh has done really good things and brought in a lot of really big projects, but sometimes there are people who only focus on those mega films and mega TV shows, and it's like that's a great anchor point for a market, but a market can't sustain on just those. So that being said, our community with audio, which is kind of the, like, you know, forgotten child that it gets pushed to the end of the project, that everybody just goes, oh yeah, that's the thing in the dark room that nobody knows about. But when it's done badly, it's real bad. And when it's done really well, no one knows we actually ever did anything, which is really the goal. It's kind of like the color grader and the color correction. If it's done well, no one goes, wow, the color on that film was amazing. If someone says that, the color wasn't amazing. Like, no one should see that. No one should know that we did anything. But for us, the big thing is, it's not just about working with the right people. For us, I guess our main thing we wanted to talk about today was, it's all about the process. And it's about a process that needs to start in pre-production. And that's one of the first big pitfalls we see with a lot of smaller independent films, is they just start going without thinking about the entire process from start to finish and how they're actually going to get to the end goal. having in pre-production really understanding not just where are we going to shoot, who are we going to shoot, who's DPing, who's doing this, but understanding in pre-production who's doing the edit, who's doing the color, who's doing the sound. All of that stuff needs to be thought of way at the beginning, because if it is thought of, then we can develop this sense of community and team where now if you're talking to the audio post people from the beginning of the project, then the audio post people can be making sure who's doing the mixing on set. Oh, well, we're going to have, no offense to everybody that's a camera person in here, but the second we hear the camera person's going to do that, we're all going,
No, it's not what they do.
no, they're not. No, they're not. The camera person is going to run the camera. And we'll often tell people, why, we'll ask, if we're involved early enough, we'll say, why are you not having a mixer on set? Well, it costs too much. It's going to cost a lot less to have a mixer on set than it is for us to fix the problems that come when you don't have a mixer on set. So that upfront, that short-sighted view of like, but we don't want to pay for that extra crew member. It's like, right, but that extra crew member is going to save you way more than they're going to charge you by the time it comes to us. Yeah. Because if we charge a lot more than they do.
Yeah, and it's not just the money too, it's time.
Yeah.
The time you're on set is the time you're on set. When you get into post, if you have deadlines, that now pushes that because it takes long to fix those problems. So that's what you run into too. It's not just a money thing, it's also a time thing.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times we've been in a situation where the thing comes to us and they go, we didn't know we needed audio. And we go, okay. And it just, and this is why we think these types of what you're all doing is so important, is because sorting this out now, it can save so much time, so much money. And not only that, in the best case scenario, if we take stuff that was done badly, we can only make it so good. But if it's done well, then we can actually bring creativity to the process and make it even more, instead of us just trying to fix things, right, we can actually bring something else to the table. And it just makes the whole project so much better. So I think like understanding that process is such a big deal. So I'm guessing most people in here really understand like the production process. I mean, we were kind of looking at what was going on before and like that's production, right? And production is the thing everybody loves because it's fun, like it's cool. We don't, it's not air conditioned.
Like our AC.
Yeah, I mean, we like...
It's also too many noises on set.
Yeah,
I like a nice quiet room.
We were joking before, we've been on sets where you see the DP and lighting and the director sit there for an hour and a half adjusting everything, and then the audio, they're like, yeah, you're ready, right? It's like, no, we're not ready, give us a second. But we understand, like, that's production.
Nature, yeah.
But if we think about that going in, so once we get through production, the way we always think about it is, in production you have all these streams that are going on at the same time. You have all these things. You might, on a bigger shoot, you might be having multiple locations shot at the same time. You might have separate film crews. But you have all of these things that are happening at the same time. And then all of that combines together. And you get to the editing. And with the editing, all those different assets that have been gathered on all these different locations by all these different people kind of come to one place and get put together. And until that edit is done, in the process the way it should be done, it's not always done this way, but the way it should be done, nothing else matters until that edit's done. We should have been in the loop at this point, but we don't want to see anything. It doesn't matter to us. Like, we don't want to see anything on a rough cut. None of it matters. The edit is just this moment that has to kind of exist on its own. And until there is lock, again, the number of times people come to us and they were like, we're almost at lock, can we send you something? And go, why? We don't want it. Until it's at lock, like, we don't want to touch it, because if we start working on it, and you change one thing, everything is going to just go insane. The timeline, the budget, you're going to waste so much. It's just not going to make sense. So, we've got all these multi-streams going on in production, then it goes to edit. Then when that lock happens and that signature is locked in, it fans out into a bunch of different directions again.
Yeah, pretty much at that point, it goes to graphics. If you're doing, a lot of high-end, animation or things like that, visual effects, usually they start working on it at that time. The colorist usually starts getting involved with the scenes that don't need graphics or visual effects. You'll also, in films where they bring in a composer, it usually goes out for the composer to really start working. They may have come up with some themes at that point, but they haven't really looked at picture and writing things for specific scenes. And then it also comes to us, and the first thing we start working on is dialogue. Dialogue is the most important thing in the film, and so that's where we start. And so at that point, everybody's kind of working separately, but at least communicating, back and forth on what's happening, and timeline is really what's most important, so that we get back to the point where once all those different elements are done, we're kind of a lot of times the last place it hits. We're the last place where it finishes, because usually by the time we get it, we need to see those visual effects or graphics that are in there because we're doing sound design for it or something like that. So we may have already started working with just still it's green screen or blocks or that sort of thing, but by the time everybody else is done, that's when we really start finishing the mix, because now we actually have all our elements together. The composer's now finished up. We have that music's all approved. And it's really funny because a lot of times in that world, it's me, the director, and the producer. And it's like, yay, the movie's done. Everybody, they had a rap party a long time ago. Everybody else had, whatever it was they did, but the movie still wasn't finished until the three of us kind of just sit there and go, all right, well, yay. Yeah, it's like, it's not really, there's no real fanfare usually when the film is actually complete, because it's just a couple people in a really dark room.
Well, we've talked about this. I mean, we hadn't really thought about it, but it came to light in the last maybe year and a half since we've been in the new room. Since we got into the new room, we've finished, I think, 6 features, or something like that, in the last year and a half, and then a bunch of shorts. And it didn't hit us until probably the 3rd one in that the first time the movie is actually together. So, color, VFX, the actual full edit, everything is done. Audio, which is going to be dialogue edit, SFX, Foley, ambiences, music, then the full the full mix itself. The first time that anybody actually sees it, the director, the producer, anybody, is usually in our studio, because that's where we'll start before the VFX are done, but we can't finish until the VFX are done. If we don't see what the explosion's supposed to look like, we aren't really sure what to make it sound like. So
we even have to wait till the credits are done so we know exactly where that music has to end.
So very often, I mean, and Shawn made a really good point with this, is we'll be sitting in our big studio with the director, with the producer, and you realize that this, multi-year project that spent how much money on, this is actually the first time anybody's seen it as a thing. Yeah, they've seen the edit, but you all have seen the edit without all the other stuff is usually not that much fun to watch. The second you get out of production, everybody goes, well, when's the movie going to be done? Well, we haven't even gotten it yet. I don't know, when are you going to get us the movie? But everybody wants it done. But one of the ways we streamline that is we'll have our entire team running on those different tracks at the same time. So Shawn might be taking the dialogue edit as a lead. So he and Greta might be tag teaming the dialogue edit. Well, I'm working on the Foley and SFX or something like that. And Ben, one of our engineers, has also is a really talented scorer, and he's now scored a few of the feature films. So he might be scoring. So we're running all of those streams at the same time. But the crazy part is they're all different sessions. So the guys in the doing the dialogue edit, they have no idea what we're doing in sound effects and Foley. We're just working with a rough dialogue. The music is being done with no concept of what's happening with the SFX and Foley and dialogue. And even for us, there's this one point where we have all these different huge sessions running. And then when you're kind of checking the boxes and going, okay, so dialogue's 100% done. SFX, Foley, and ambiences are 100% done. Music is 100% done. And these huge sessions, like massive, scary sessions, all then get built into one absolutely horrifying session that we open in Pro Tools for the first time, and you just go, that's it. That's everything.
Now we've got to mix all those elements together.
Yeah, now we actually have to make them all work. In the background of us doing this, the colorist is doing color, because we're not working on a color graded film yet. We're not even working on a high res film. We're working on like a low res print, just because we don't want to be running massive footage. We don't need it. So we've got an uncolored low res film that we're working with. Half the time when we start, the VFX are just rough.
If they're even there.
Yeah.
Usually it's just a green screen with a thing that says VFX and kind of a description of what it is.
Yeah. And, you know, and we're doing our best in this, like, we haven't even discussed ADR yet, because we try to avoid ADR.
If
like,
all possible.
If possible, we will stay as far away from it as possible, just because we can get really good at it, but it is very time consuming. It is horrifyingly expensive.
Additional dialogue recording. A lot of people think about it like, oh, there was an issue on set, there was a noise, and the person had to come back in. 90% of the time, it's actually script changes, especially in television. That's like we just did Mayor of Kingstown their last season, and almost, I'd say 90% of the ADR we did wasn't on camera. It was off camera, and it was because they changed the script during the edit. So it's just additional dialogue recording. Bring the actor back into the studio. We try to set it up where we're using a very similar or the same microphone that was used on set. We try to mic it very similar to that it would have been used on set, and then they listen to what they did on set, and then they match that. And so that's what ADR is. Hopefully you don't notice that we did ADR. But the hard part with ADR is that actor. They're now in a confined room, no wardrobe on, no makeup, no other actors.
They probably haven't been that actor for 6 months.
Or a year.
Or that character.
You know, so yeah, they haven't played that character in a long time, and now all of a sudden they're like, oh, I've got to, match that again. I once worked with an actor. He was, I don't know if you guys saw the TV show Outsiders.
I was in that TV show.
Okay, so one of the actors on that came in. So he was one of the people that lived out in the wilderness, and they had their very distinct accent. Yeah, but that's what they were doing. So they had a very distinct accent, but he had to come in to do ADR for a movie that was set in the 50s in Boston. And so all of a sudden, he's got to try to remember the Boston accent that he used during that film. And it was extremely hard for him. And the day they had booked, they couldn't get his dialogue coach that had worked with him on the film. So it ended up, we got nothing usable out of that day because it was so difficult for him to try to get back into it. So that's the hard part of ADR, is you're trying to do this so far out in comparison to when it was done originally. And those actors, some actors are very good at it and some aren't.
Well,
some actors throw a fit about it.
Yes.
And then to make it even more complicated, and this is why ADR is, we do a lot of it. I mean, we probably do 90% of it that comes through Pittsburgh. One of the funny thing, by the way, with Outsiders, I mean, talking about a sense of community. So Shawn was doing all the ADR for Outsiders. I was doing all the music for Outsiders, and we weren't working together. And apparently, you were in Outsiders. So
well, there's stuff from that village, and we're all still in Facebook groups together.
Yeah. So
I know Ted Williams really well.
Oh yeah.
But ADR also has this added thing where, because of what's happening, so ADR, we push off. Audio is at the end of the project. ADR is at the end of audio, because we want to avoid it so much that we will do everything we can to salvage the audio that is humanly possible. And then in that last little bit, when we finally go, here's the list, we just can't salvage this. Right. I mean, we will go, actually we did this on Judge Not, we'll go in and try to find audio from other takes and then re-edit it to try to match the lip sync just to prevent ADR. It is such a thing. And so the actors tend not to like it because it's a huge pain for them. It's usually happening 6 months or a year after they shot. So now we have to get them back into that character headspace in a soundproof room. You know,
who knows where they are?
Right. And they're probably on another movie at this point. So they're in one character space and we got to pull them into another character space. So all of that makes it hard. And then on top of that, it is incredibly technically complicated. It's probably the single most complicated thing that we do. And to add more complication to it, very often, actually most of the time, the actor's in Pittsburgh because they're on another film or another TV show. So the film or the TV show is being done, the post is all being done in LA. So the director, the producer, the ADR supervisor, the sound supervisor, the entire crew that is involved is in LA. The actor's in Pittsburgh. So what they have to do now is we have to do an incredibly technically complicated session and then remote in a bunch of directors, producers, sound designers, ADR supervisors, sound supervisors, from different places on different connections, stream them video in real time that has really good sync with high definition audio so they can hear what's happening and see what's happening and make comments. When we do a 10-hour mix day, we walk out going like, wow, that was a lot. When we do a 30-minute ADR session, we come out going, that sucked. It's brutal. I mean, so we avoid it. And because of that, not only is it brutal on everybody, it bills extremely high. Because for us, it's our highest booking rate because it is such a nightmare to deal with. But you also then remember, most of the time, the director is on the call, the producer might be on the call, the sound soup is on the call, the ADR soup is on the call. They probably have a studio in LA booked for the other sync end of it. So you're all of a sudden talking about, and the actor is getting full rate.
Right.
So you've got to be thinking these sessions could easily be costing the film $1,000 plus an hour. So they are you avoid those
as much as possible.
So that is one of those things where, you want to talk about the end of the end of the end of the process. But again, think about that. If you hire a good audio person on set, it means you can avoid as much ADR as possible. So all of a sudden that audio person that might cost a couple $1,000s for the shoot, when you realize that they save you $10,000 in ADR, it doesn't seem that bad. And the reality is, at the end of the day, we both do it. ADR is never going to be as good as on set. It's just never going to be the same.
The performance will never be the same.
It's never going to have the consistency. We can get it where you're not going to know, but it's never going to be the preferred method. It's why we will do everything we can to avoid it.
What do we have to look for on set to try to bypass all that work?
The biggest thing really is to bring in somebody who does that. That's why you bring in an audio person on set. It's also thinking about, where you're shooting, sometimes, and that's what an audio guy will do is say, hey, if we're facing this direction, that causes me a lot of problems. But if we turn and face this direction, it's actually going to be better. Just a simple thing like that. I worked on something where I could hear a water fountain in the back, but couldn't see it. And it's like if they just turned the camera and had the water fountain in the shot, you now don't have to deal with it as well because it makes sense to hear it. Exactly. So it's literally, I now don't have to get rid of the water fountain in there because you see the water fountain. Not seeing the water fountain but hearing it is a huge problem. Well, so that's the type of thing where a person on set that is thinking about the audio comes in extremely handy because the director, the DP, everybody else is more the visual stuff. They're not really worried about the audio and thinking about that. They have headphones on, but half the time they're not really listening anyway. They're just making sure the dialogue's, what they're supposed to be saying. So it's really finding somebody that looks at that detail.
My comments on the camera, this is no shade thrown at DPs, camera ops, at all. They've got a hard job to do. Running a camera well takes all of your focus. It is impossible to ask them, just like no audio person is ever going to say, oh, by the way, just give me the third camera, I'll handle it. They're going, no, I've got a job to do. This is my job. This is what I do. If you want it done well, I have to focus on this thing. It's impossible to ask the DP, who's not supposed to be worrying about that, to say, oh, by the way, think about the audio too. Don't just worry about the lighting. Don't just worry about the focus. Don't just worry about any of that. Think about the audio too. They can't. It's not possible. So even if it's not hiring a big pro to come in, which isn't always doable, and we understand that, just having someone that is doing that and not doing everything else, just like it's really hard if you're the director to also be doing the camera. Being a director, you got to let the director direct. Let them do their job. Let the DP do their job. Let the grip do their job. Let the audio person do their job. And then it's all about, every camera person, every DP in town knows good audio people, and they know there are also, just like every other member of crew, there are the people that are the best in the city that cost a lot, and if we can't afford those, it's like, oh, but here these people will do a really good job too. These people, but it's all about the gear they're bringing, just the same way, good camera people, a good camera and a good lens is going to look better than a bad camera and a bad lens. So you want to have a DP that's going to bring good equipment. Audio is the same way. So it's not about you have to spend a lot of money. It's just about you have to be thinking about it, that it's happening. And honestly, if you go back to what we first talked about, which is when you're first putting out a film and you're starting to do pre-production on it, if you call someone like us and go, hey, we're doing this film, we're thinking about, we'd like to talk to you all about doing the audio post on it, then we can go, great, who's doing the mix? Who's doing the field recording? And if you say, we don't know, we can go, we can tell you, what's the budget? What are we trying to do? Here are the 3 people you should call, because we know them all, because we're getting all of their work. And we can also tell you, if you go, I was thinking about using this person, we can go, you should call these 3 people. But that's it. I think it's going back to that idea of community, utilizing that community. And if from the beginning in pre-production you go, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and not just going, let's run with it, but bringing in the community and talking to a DP up front and saying, what should we be doing? Should we be shooting 1 camera or 2? Should we be shooting 1 better camera, or do we need 2 cameras? Do we need a B camera? That kind of stuff, involving the people in the beginning. We're so used to coming in projects at the last minute, and then, and by the way, editors are the same way. Everybody in post wants to be involved just to be able to make sure production is setting us up for success. There's this weird thing in the industry that neither of us, we talk about all the time, and we don't understand why it's true. There's this divide between post and production that just, I think it's the air conditioning thing. But no, there really is this divide where it's like, production's just worried about production, post is just worried about post, and it's like, but we're all working on the same projects. So why aren't we all talking to each other and making sure that everybody's setting everybody else up for the best situation? The only people who really carry the project all the way through are the director and the producer. And those people should be talking to people like us and the editor and the colorist. And we can't tell you how many times we've worked on films that while we're doing the audio, they go, do you guys know any colorists? And we're going, you don't have a colorist?
Right.
You know we're done in 2 weeks, right? So I think just having that communication, and that applies to anywhere from really micro budgets up to big budgets. Just understanding that process is everything.
Yeah.
And it will make your project run smoother, more on budget, and you'll end up with something that you're much, much happier with.
But when it comes to like the recommendations, somebody asked about like, do they go to school for that? I mean, I've worked with people that come in with their film, they look at the budget, and I say, I know some students that would love to do this. And that's, you're getting a person who's really concentrating on the audio, and they're trying to learn. So, of course, they're going to do the job that needs to be done. That works. That's better than just handing it to somebody on set and going, hey, you're the audio guy today. That student might do it for a very low budget, or maybe, no budget if you feed them that day, because usually college kids are hungry. But it is that. It's all about, looking at what the budget is, what's the end goal, and will help. I mean, I've done plenty of stuff where I don't work on the film, I've just consulted on it. Yep. Because people were just asking me, who they should work with, how they should do certain things. So that's what we also are trying to do, is it's not just about, oh, we're going to do the job and we're going to try to charge money for it. It's like, we'll help consult. We'll help you find the right people, help you find, move your project along as best they can do.
That brings up a great point too. Even if it's a project, when we get it, even if it's something we can't necessarily work on. So I'm a professor at Duquesne I'm in the music school, but I teach in the music production and sound program. And if there's a project that we get where we just go, listen, we can't bring anything to the table to this, we'll connect you with people who this is going to be a great fit for you. They're going to do a lot better work for you, and where they are in their career, this is a perfect project for them. One that I can't believe people don't utilize more, my department also controls the composition department for the entire music school. Every composition major in my program, there are probably 14 or 15 of them at this point, they all want to score for film. Every one of them, their dream is to score for film and video games. Now, I make a point to them, and you might all hate me for this, I tell them all, never work for free. Never work for free. That's not okay. You're professionals. You deserve to be paid for what you do, just like everybody who does this deserves to get paid for what they do. But I can also tell you what they deserve to get paid is very, very different than if we connect you with some of our more established composers. So the point is there's a group for everybody. We have a couple composers in Pittsburgh that were LA guys who moved back to Pittsburgh because honestly, no one likes LA. But
Cost of living.
yeah, but they all went, we made our name, we're established, no one cares where we are anymore. We're from Pittsburgh, we moved our families back to Pittsburgh. Most of their work is still LA work. We just did a couple sessions for one of them, and nothing else is being done in Pittsburgh, but all the musicians, the composer, and the studio for all the music was in Pittsburgh. Everything else is in New York and LA. I can tell you I won't say the name, but he won't touch a feature. He will not touch an independent feature, and this is just for the composition budget, for under $25,000. He won't look at it. It's just where he is in his career. Good for him. Great. There are also other composers that won't touch it for under $500,000. You should not talk to them. But I also have students who are doing amazing work. I mean, truly amazing work, pro-level work, that if you said, would you score our film for $1,000? They would go, yes, absolutely. Now, the next film, they won't, because your film was their springboard, and now they're a better pro and they're going to ask for more. But it's great because it gives them an in on a real film, but it also gives you not using stock library music that probably cost you the same amount anyway. So it's all about finding that if you have the plan from A to Z, then it's about talking to people who know how to fill in the pieces that you need. And if you do that, that keeps films on budget, it keeps films on timelines, and it makes the films just overall better. So
We'll bring up the stock music is another place where a lot of people make mistakes, is not really understanding how licensing works. You know, they may look at it, licensing says, oh, this is for, you know, anything online. Yeah, anything online that isn't monetized could possibly be a thing. So if you actually want to put your stuff out and, you know, have it for rent or anything like that, that changes that licensing. So
and
that's
a lot of those licenses can't be transferred too.
Yes.
So if you make a film and you release it and you have the licensing for that, and then someone tries to buy that film, you can't transfer the license to that stock music. So yeah, watching out for all of that stuff is,
Yeah.
and people a lot of times will think, oh, my film's too small for that to matter. It doesn't matter. No. If they catch you, they will go after you.
Yeah.
Licensing's not something you want to mess with.
Right. Yeah, make sure you look at what that licensing covers, because a lot of people think, oh, it's royalty free. Nah, that's not actually what it means. Yeah. And there's different versions of that. There's what we call needle drop, which is you use it on like one thing. That's usually an advertising. It's like one television spot, and they can use it for however long. Usually it's a weekly buy, like they get it for 14, 16 weeks, depending on how long that spot's going to run. There's also buyouts. That's where you actually pay them, you now own it, and you can use it however you want. But that pricing difference is obviously going to be huge. When it comes to composers, that's all contract and negotiation based. You know, you can give them, you know, one fell swoop, they do it for the money, that is now your music. The only other thing that usually goes along with that is it gives them the option that if they want to just use it as a soundtrack, they can sell that on their own. So that gives them another monetary stream.
But they can't sell it to another film.
Right, they can't sell it to another film,
So
but they
it's
can
still
just
an
put it out
exclusive
for people to
license.
hear without the movie, just as the score. So that's usually a part of that contract negotiation, is allowing them to be able to do that. And so they'll do your movie for a little less if they have another monetary stream, you know, to gain on that. So it's always a negotiation when it comes to those types of things, you know, when you're working with a composer. So that's the other beauty of a composer is once you set that, you don't have to worry about it moving forward. So if you take your film to, you know, a film festival, somebody actually wants to distribute it, there's no problem there. Usually what happens is you use music from a music library, you take it to a film festival, if somebody wants to purchase it, you either got to relicense it or you have to put new music in to fix that problem. So it's just thinking about those ahead of time, like what's your goal? If your goal is to monetize it and put it out for rent, make sure your music is set for that, no matter what else you're going to do with it. So it's always knowing what that end is.
And I think we have to go soon because my wife has texted me and said, I'm alone with our daughters.
For far too long, yeah.
That's not true. She did not say that. I just realized there was a camera. I'll edit it out. All right. Yeah, I'm going to ADR. That's going to be a script change. My wife is amazing. But I think what this all comes down to is there's a huge amount of information, and I think a lot of times when we'll talk to people about this, we've had this happen where someone will come into the studio and you see them after we talk to them about the process and they just look like a deer in the headlight. The whole point is you don't actually need to know all of this. The point is there are people that know all of this. We know all of this. You know this. Not the camera, the person behind the camera. But there are lots of people, and getting yourself with the right people is the key. Because if you don't know an on-location sound person, that's fine. We do. And we can guide you to the right person. And we want it to be the right person because it makes our life a lot easier if what we're getting is right to begin with. If you've got you've got a great screenplay and you've got a great producer and you're looking for a director and you just don't know who to find, talk to people who are doing it and say, hey, we've got this independent film, we're looking for this. Do you know anybody who might be a good fit on it? And we have found time and time again, the people who are legitimately doing this, like the real people who want to do this, all believe in this idea of community, and they're going like, yeah, let me get you to the right person. Like, it's more important to me that you find the right person and this is a great experience and you walk out of the other side of it going, that was awesome, because then everybody wins. Everybody gets better about that. If you come to us and say, hey, we're doing a film and we want you to do post, and for some reason we go, you know what, it might just not be the right fit for us or whatever, we're not just going to go, bye. We're going to say, let us help you find somebody who is the right fit for you. You know, I joke if we ever did get a $100 million film, I'd like to think that I'm ethically good enough that I would say, you should go to someone in LA, but honestly, I'd still take it. I would just take the whole film. I would. We'd be like Skywalker East.
Yeah, sure. We can try that. Yeah.
Before Shawn was on our team, we got a job to do this commercial, and we don't do production, except for this time. And we were brought in because the commercial needed all these people singing, so we used a thump track, and we needed to come in to do all the playback and control all of that. And the producer on the shoot was someone who we work with a lot in post, and she goes, can you guys come in and do this for us? And I said, yeah, we've got you. So we went and did location, which was really out of my comfort zone, but we did it. And I remember we were sitting in a kitchen, and the mixer on set was going, he goes, man, we got to get all these hood vents off. Like, these are just way too loud. There's no way we're going to be able to do this. And the head of the restaurant came back and he goes, if you turn those hoods off and those stoves are on, we're in breach of every code there is. You can't do it. So you either have to turn the flames off. And they were like, and you know, the director was like, you can't, we're cooking. Like, you have to have the flames on. And I remember looking at the producer and going, man, I feel bad for whoever's doing the audio post on it. And she looked at me and she goes, it's you. And I just kind of went,
oh, yeah.
Like, this is why I don't do production.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, we're happy to stay around for a little while if you have any. Are there any other questions? Cool.
Our film, how many hours would you say that was?
A lot.
Well,
They're all a lot.
Yeah.
A feature film is just a huge amount of time.
yeah. With Judge Not, it was a little different because our main focus there was the dialogue. A lot of the sound design had already been done. We weren't really involved in the music. The music was, given to us. So it was mainly just what I called a dialogue edit and then a mix. The only other thing I added was some ambience here and there, and mainly that was to help the dialogue because of, just the way the edit is. Sometimes you get holes in the dialogue, and it's like I can only get rid of a certain amount of the ambience, so I got to fill those holes. And one of the ways is to actually add more ambience. We always say that. It's like we take the dialogue and we get rid of as much of the noise, and then we just add noise back in. The key is we now have control of that noise. Yeah.
I can tell you this. So we just finished another feature, and it was a pretty good size feature. And the only reason I know this is because we just did the final numbers, and all of our time we did all the audio post. We oversaw the 2 composers on it. We did all the music recording. So we did anything to do with sound in this film was us. And that film, all in for our entire team and the 2 composers, it was about a little over 1,000 hours. Now, that was a very intense, that was a big mix. It was a big soundtrack. There were also issues with that film that we had to work on. That would be, but I mean, I would, on a certain other film that I'm not going to say that you worked on a lot, I mean, that had to be in that same range.
No, it was probably more than that.
Yeah. So like,
Just because with that film, because this is the other thing, when we talk about that process earlier, it sometimes doesn't happen that way. I worked on a film where they were funding it as they were going. So they shot a bunch of scenes, cut a little bit of those scenes together, and then we're using that to show to people to get more funding. And so we were almost finishing, or at least doing good roughs on those scenes. So I was doing a quick dialogue edit, adding some ambience, throwing some sound design in there. So by the time that film was fully cut together, I probably had 50 to 60% of it fairly well done because we were working on it in pieces. And that's just how they had to do it to get the funding to do that film.
I would say realistically, I'm just trying to think about it in my head. I would say Judge Not. It's a little hard because we have multiple teams working at the same time. So it's not, an hour isn't an hour, it's 5 hours if everybody's working on it. I would say realistically on Judge Not, we probably have 200 to 250 hours.
Somewhere around there.
That's probably pretty standard. I would say a feature film low end would be 150 to 200. I would say 1,000 would be on the upper end.
Yeah. Depends on what the
depends.
film is. I mean,
Yeah.
luckily Judge Not isn't real sound effect heavy.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people just sitting in a room talking. You get into a horror film or an action movie, that starts to add up double, triple the amount of time because there's so much more happening within the scenes,
And the other thing, and this is kind of a weird thing to say, but what we usually tell people is when they come to us and say, how much is it going to cost to do the audio for this film? And everybody thinks we're joking when we say this. Our answer is always, what's the budget?
Right.
Because if you have this much, it's not that we'll take it and order lunch. We'll put that much time into it. It's just that much deeper that we can go into the sound design, the sound effects, and the craziness. If the budget's this, and that's why we always say, like, no matter what it is, like, talk to good people, because what you don't want to do is say, oh, we're going to use someone that doesn't know what they're doing to save money. It's, no, go to good people that know what they're doing. If it's not us, fine, but go to good people and then say, I would rather have 20 hours of good than 80 hours of work that's not going to turn out well anyway.
Me, it's all about expectations.
Yeah.
That was the conversation we had with Aaron was, okay, what's your budget? It's this. Okay, here's what we can do within that budget. This is what we'll concentrate on. And that's what we do. And so it's all about that. It's like, okay, your budget isn't that big. The first thing I'll do is go, okay, if we don't see people's feet, we don't hear footsteps.
And that's okay.
That's where we get into those expectations. What is most important on your film? That's what we're going to work on. After that, if we have some extra time, we'll put that in. But that's what we look at when we negotiate that, and we talk about what is your budget, what can your budget cover. So when people go, what's the film cost to do? It's like, it depends on what the work is and what your expectations are.
Even when you go into like the budget for a composer, people will think that's a flat rate. I mean, number one, it massively depends on who the composer is, but also it depends on, we've done a bunch of films where the composers do all of their it's called synthesization in the box. It sounds amazing. It's amazing. I mean, you wouldn't know that it wasn't real. It's that good. That saves a huge amount of money. We've done films where we do 80% of it in the box and then only do the lead instruments real. That's a little bit more expensive. Sounds a little bit better. We, in our studio now, have a room that can hold a 110-piece orchestra. That's the best. That is really expensive. That is shockingly, shockingly expensive, because to get musicians at a caliber where they're worth having in, you know, you put 80 musicians into a room getting union scale, that time costs a lot. Is it amazing? Absolutely, of course it's amazing.
Is it for every film?
Is it for every film? Absolutely not. Those things can exist at the same time, and I think that's what a lot of people have like trouble. We're fine with any of those. If the film calls for an all-in-the-box score, great. Let's do it. Let's make that as good as it can possibly be, and it can be great. And if you win the lottery and you want to put a 100-piece orchestra conducted by Hans Zimmer in your film, let's do it. I would happy. It's all about matching the project to the goals of the project and the scope of the project. And that doesn't mean anything ever has to be dumbed down. It's just about scoping it correctly for what it's trying to be.
The dialogue gets into, your main thing is getting it to a point where you don't have annoying noise. Because you don't want to pull out too much of the natural ambient, because then it starts to sound unreal. Because what you start affecting then too is the natural reverb of the room, because that gets lost in the noise, and so you end up taking that out, and so it sounds very sterile when it needs to sound like you're in that space. Recreating that space after the fact takes more time, and also is never going to quite sound the same. So it's a happy medium between what noise to get rid of and what noise to keep, and it's more about making it subtly flat. So when you move a microphone around a room, the ambient of that room changes in its sound. And so that's what you're doing when you shoot. You have a camera angle over here, you camera angle over here, you're doing a wide, you're doing a close-up. So when you edit that noise every time you edit changes level. Our main thing is to get that to nice sound so you don't hear that. You know, some of that is getting rid of the noise, some of it's adding a consistent noise in with it so you feel more of that consistency and you don't hear those changes. I worked on a documentary once where they were in the middle of New York interviewing a bunch of people. The way it's cut together is you have this person, this person, this person, back to number 1, back to number 2, 3, 4. You know, it's just jumbled together about 6 or 7 people. And it's just quick couple sentences from each, and then you edit and back. They had an ambulance behind in one of them, and it was pretty far back. And they had asked me, even before they started the edit, they're like, hey, we got this guy, there's an ambulance in the back. I listened to it and went, I can work with that. What I ended up doing to really make it sound like everybody's in the same place is I found a matching ambulance and I put it behind everybody at the same, and I varied the level. So in some people it was really low, then you come back up to that person where it's in, you know, so that's the loudest spot it is, and everywhere else it's just still back there, because now it feels like you're just moving the camera around as opposed to making those edits. So that's a lot of what we do too. It's not necessarily, you know, it's always different depending on the film and how the film was shot, how the audio was done on set. So, but that's where we really spend most of our time, is the dialogue.
Well, and this is what throws a lot of people the first time they see it. We'll spend a huge amount of time not removing the noise, like Shawn said, just getting it down so it's not distracting, and more importantly than anything, consistent. Then there's a whole nother process where we're actually building ambiences which add the noise back in, but it's the noise we want it to be. And the other big thing is, in most film mixes, we're going to mix in 5.1 surround, and then we're going to down mix to stereo. In that surround, the dialogue is only in the center channel. So we then need to get that same noise to appear in all 5 channels, so you sound, it feels like you're in that room. That noise doesn't exist. It never was recorded. It was recorded with a lav or a boom. So we need to now get that noise, make it consistent, lower it to the point where it's not a problem, then get 5.1 noise that sounds like that noise so the center channel doesn't sound weird compared to the other ones, and fill that in all the other speakers. So now it sounds like the person is just talking in front of you. It doesn't sound like there's this hiss and noise right here and nothing anywhere else. Doing that where you don't know it's done, like that goes back to the original comment of one of the trickiest things about our job is if we do our job well, nobody knows that we did our job. Right. If you know that we did our job, if someone goes, wow, the dialogue edit was great on that, I'm going, you heard the dialogue edit?
That's not good.
That's not good. Yeah. Like, you shouldn't really know that we ever did anything. Yeah. It's kind of like when an editor cuts an action scene and like people start going like, I can't believe how many cuts you got in that. You were counting the cuts? That's not good. Like, you shouldn't know any of that. You should just experience the movie. It's just really hard to do it well and just experience the movie.
Yeah. The other part of that is too, it's knowing what to do early, what to do late, that sort of thing. One of the things I see when it comes to like dialogue editing in people in experiences, they'll do too much noise reduction early on. And that's a problem because later you're going to add ambience, you're going to add music. There was no need to take all that noise out because you're not going to hear it anyway. So you wasted a bunch of time doing something that didn't need to be done. So if you wait, you get it just even, then you wait till later and you go, oh, I need to pull a little more of that because there is no music here or that sort of thing. But the whole point is to not waste time. Yeah. And that's another part of, just experience coming from that world. It's just doing that over and over again. You learn, I made mistakes and I'm going to learn from those mistakes. And so that's a big part of when you're working on a large movie is anytime you can save and utilize somewhere else is, going to help that project. Because like we talked about earlier, if I spend 10 hours, 15 hours just fixing mistakes, that's 10 to 15 hours I don't have to put into the creative process. I don't have time to really put into the sound design, doing a little extra here, or when we get into the mixing, it's now like we're running out of time, we've got to hurry up. It leaves me time later to really have that, to put detail in.
Speaking of time,
we do
have to go.
Yeah.
Well, thanks guys, that was great.
Yeah, no problem.
That's a lot of work.
We're happy. We do have business cards if anybody wants them. Yeah. So.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to connect with us on Facebook to stay updated on all our latest projects, events, and behind-the-scenes content. You can also visit our website at blankethillproductions.com for more information about our team and upcoming films. Be sure to check out our latest release, Judge Not, available to rent or purchase now on Amazon Prime Video. Thanks again for listening, and as always, have a blessed day.
This Blanket Hill podcast episode was sponsored by Vascelli's Pizza. Classic Italian quality.